So I'm really proud to be here on this 15th anniversary of the Zimbabwe Vigil, which began in October 2002. It's an extraordinary achievement that you have maintained this vigil for 15 years non-stop. I think it's got to be the longest ever vigil in the United Kingdom. So give yourselves a big round of applause. I calculate that in these 15 years, there's been about 780 vigils here. 780 over 15 years. That's truly, truly amazing. And these are vigils for democracy and human rights in Zimbabwe, in solidarity with the people of Zimbabwe against the Mugabe dictatorship. We're here, you're here, I'm here, we're all here because we want to see free and fair elections, because we don't believe that the Mugabe regime is a legitimate government, because every election has been rigged. Every election has not been free and fair. So our simple demand is, let the people decide. Give the people of Zimbabwe free and fair elections to elect a government that represents the true majority of the Zimbabwean people. As we all know, Robert Mugabe was once a liberation hero. He and the people of Zimbabwe fought against the white minority regime of Ian Smith to establish black majority rule, to end detentions and torture, to end the censorship, to ensure that the white minority regime was history. And the people of Zimbabwe, under Mugabe's leadership, did win. They ended the tyranny of white supremacism. They established a black majority government. The great tragedy is that in the years since liberation, Robert Mugabe has turned from a hero of the people to the enemy of the people, to a torturer and a tyrant, an autocrat and a dictator who is oppressing his own people, which he once fought to liberate. In fact, President Mugabe's regime has killed more black Africans than the white minority regime of Ian Smith. He's killed more black Africans than even P.W. Botha during the apartheid era in South Africa. We know that at least 5,000 to 10,000 and possibly 20,000 people, African people, were massacred in Matabeleland in the 1980s by Mugabe's forces. And since then, many hundreds, many thousands more have been killed by his regime simply for seeking democracy and human rights. Today, the Mugabe regime is marked by detention without trial, torture, and assassination. It's marked by nepotism and corruption. The Mugabe dynasty is now being put in place, with Grace, his wife, to succeed the president. This is not democracy. It is not what the African liberation heroes of the past fought for. When Kwame Nkrumah began the African liberation struggle against colonialism in the 1950s, he never envisaged that any African nation would stoop to the despotism that we see in Zimbabwe today. He never envisaged that the liberation leaders would become post-independence leaders and then descend into a cycle of authoritarianism and human rights abuses. What's happening today in Zimbabwe is a betrayal of the ideals of African liberation. African liberation has surely got to be about democracy and human rights, about freedom for the people, about representative government. And that is something the people of Zimbabwe have not had for many, many decades. I think that the African leaders who fought against colonialism would be shocked, ashamed, and worse if they could see the way in which Zimbabwe has gone. A country with such a future, such amazing, extraordinary people, vast natural resources, reduced to economic deprivation, where millions of Zimbabweans are malnourished and living in destitution. That is not what the Zimbabwe liberation struggle was about. Indeed, the Mugabe regime today is far worse than the colonial administration of the British. And that's saying a lot, because the British were pretty bad, but the Mugabe regime is sadly even worse. And the great shame is that some countries around the world still host visits by Robert Mugabe. They fate him as a legitimate leader. They give him the trappings and wherewithal of a head of state, as if he had been truly democratically elected, as if he was serving the people of Zimbabwe. The question I have is, why do so many countries allow Mugabe to travel there? Why do they allow his wife to shop in their stores? Why do they allow his regime to funnel money abroad, money that should be used for the upliftment and empowerment and development of Zimbabwe? And why has President Mugabe never been prosecuted under the United Nations Convention Against Torture? We know he has endorsed torture. He's condoned it. He's acquiesced in torture, which is a crime of universal jurisdiction. Any state leader who commits or authorizes torture anywhere in the world can be arrested in the 100+ countries that have signed the Convention Against Torture. But none of them do so, including here in Britain. When I and others tried to arrest him in London in 1999, it was on the charge of torture. And we had the legal papers to show that President Mugabe had authorized the torture of 2 black journalists, Ray Choto and Mark Chavanduka, who at that time worked for the Standard newspaper in Harare. The legal evidence for Mugabe's arrest and trial in Britain was overwhelming. Yet the British government looked the other way. After I and my colleagues from Outrage were arrested, when we tried to arrest Mugabe, we were taken to the cells in Belgravia police station, and Mugabe was given a police escort to go Christmas shopping at Harrods. That is Britain's shame. That is Britain's shame, that we allowed a torturer to escape the due process of law. And equally, we must ask, why has the International Criminal Court never pursued charges against Robert Mugabe? Torture is a crime under the Rome Treaty of 1998. It specifically says in Article 27 that high state officials are not immune from prosecution. So why has the ICC, the International Criminal Court, never brought a charge against Mugabe? Why has the United Nations never set up a special tribunal, like they did in Rwanda and the ex-Yugoslavia, to put Mugabe and his henchmen on trial? Zimbabwe. The United Nations Human Rights Council, which is the guardian of global human rights, has failed the people of Zimbabwe. Mugabe's regime has lasted far too long. But I take heart from the knowledge that no tyranny lasts forever. Every dictator eventually has his fall. Adolf Hitler promised a 1,000-year Reich. He lasted a mere 12 years. Mugabe has lasted much longer, far too long. But he too will have his fall. And let's hope that sooner rather than later. Well done to all of you for maintaining this extraordinary vigil for 15 years non-stop. Through all weathers, through all ups and downs, through all trials and tribulations. It is a huge tribute to your determination and your sacrifice that you've kept this vigil going. And we will keep it going. And you will win in the end. Freedom will come to Zimbabwe. Freedom for Zimbabwe has been long delayed, but freedom for Zimbabwe cannot be denied. Thank you.